Today, we're releasing a podcast episode here on the channel. Now, this episode is with Dr. Sherry. She's a retired CPA and a former IRS agent who, and I did not realize this prior to recording with her, so you will see my very shocked face during the interview, but who actually went to prison for 3 years after working for the IRS. She has now done a complete 180 and she's all about diversification strategies, not only what we talk about outside of the country, but also diversification in your income. And she helps everyday business owners and mom and pop shops to be able to make financial freedom a reality for themselves and to use the strategies and tactics that a lot of these big companies utilize in order to pay little to no tax because that is the reality on the ground. And she did see that firsthand. In the interview, she also shares some of the shocking ways that she heard in court and in back rooms working for the IRS on how these big corporations shockingly get out of paying large tax bills. And you will be shocked. So let's dive into this interview. This is definitely something that you want to listen to the audio and you're going to want to watch until the end to really hear about how the inner workings of the IRS work from a former IRS agent and why she is looking to move to Costa Rica. She has a house there, she's getting her residency there and looking to diversify out of the US. We also talk about how she no longer holds any financial investments, whether it be stocks, ETFs, bonds in the US, and she really ensures to only hold hard assets in terms of investment. So let's dive into this episode.
Well, I am a retired CPA and former IRS agent. I have a degree in accounting and I teach people how to keep, protect, and grow what they earn in my financial consulting firm. I got here just by, age and wisdom. What is working in the world? What is not working in the world? Figure out what the wealthy people do and do that.
Interesting. I love that. You have very much so made a concise summary out of an entire career of work that you've done. So, I know that you used to work for the IRS. So, maybe let's start with your accounting background, working for the IRS, what that looked like, and then why you chose to leave that and to do what you're doing today.
Well, that's a very interesting story. So I worked, well, first of all, let's go back to my dad. He told me that when I was 18, I was getting out of the house. So I had to pick a career that was going to make me some money because he said, you like nice things. So I selected accounting, got the accounting degree. I worked in CPA firms for 2 years. In order to get your CPA, that's the quickest way to get it. Got the CPA. I moved on to corporate America, and I didn't like corporate America because a lot of times, unfortunately, it's not about what you know, it's about who you know and what you do with who you know. And that's a shame, but I was always taught not to complain. If you don't like where you are at point A, go to point B. So I left there. So I added in the paper, IRS agent. What does that entail? Auditing. Okay, I did okay in auditing. And it was a job that, I really liked it because it was independent. I didn't depend on someone else giving me financial statements in order for me to do my job. So I was there for 7.5 years. I learned a lot about the IRS and the government and how the tax system works. And, it's basically unfair, misrepresented, and misapplied. We started this country with taxation without representation with the Boston Tea Party, and we're back there again. So, me being a mother and a wife at the time, my duties started to increase. And I decided that I was going to leave and start a CPA firm. And I started a CPA firm doing taxes and bookkeeping. And then after that, I decided that I was going to not do the taxes anymore. Had a big fight with the IRS. Of course, it's all over the internet if anybody wants to see it. But realized that you can't cut the head of the beast off. You have to starve the beast. So I teach people how to keep the money that they earn. There are ways that a lot of wealthy people talk about. They don't pay taxes. From what I understand, Warren Buffett pays less taxes than his secretary. And there was a woman named Leona Helmsley back in the day that said that only the poor people pay taxes. And she's right. Even corporations don't pay taxes. So what are they doing that we aren't doing as a middle class or upper middle class. That's what I learned, and that's what I teach people. There are so many different loopholes in the tax code. The tax code is written for businesses. President Donald Trump said that back in 2016 when he was debating in that first race with Hillary Clinton. She got up on the stage and said, Donald Trump didn't pay his taxes. And everybody said, and everybody called me. Did you hear? Did you hear? I didn't hear because I don't have TV. But I got on the internet and I saw it. And after she said that, he said, I'm a smart man. And he is a smart man because he uses the tax code in his favor. So I teach clients to use the tax code in their favor, among other things.
Ooh, okay. A lot to dive into there. We are going to dive into how the wealthy are paying little to no tax, the middle class are paying tax, what some strategies around that look like. But first, I want to go back to what you mentioned at the beginning. So the US tax system is unfair, misrepresented, and misapplied. What are some things that you saw working for the US government, for the IRS? If you can share some things that you saw where you were just like, this is not right, this is not fair. I want to hear everything.
So, to be fair, I didn't really learn the depth of the misapplication until I left. But while I was there, I saw a lot of disparity. Mom and pop, when they were audited, they did not have the money for representation, and they are considered the low hanging fruit. So there were businesses that had to close or reorganize or just start over because with a tax bill of even $30,000, that could just ruin a company. And with the larger companies, they had the CPAs and attorneys that would fight against the IRS. And really, Nicole, there are negotiations that go on where one of them that I heard, the t- the corporation supposedly owed a lot of money, and they were negotiating with the IRS attorneys. And the IRS attorney said to the attorney of the corporation, "Hey, I'll reduce the tax if you get me a date with that lady on the second floor with the big breast." These things happen. They do happen. But the disparity that I saw personally, I had a case. It was a corporate case, and they didn't prepare the tax return correctly. They owed over $175,000. I turned the case in, and the protocol says if you turn a case in and the taxpayer decides to fight it, then it goes to the appeals, but it goes to you so that you can rebut whatever their appeal is. So I turn it in, they fight back, and then I have a rebuttal. Well, I turned the case in, moved on, and I passed my supervisor's secretary's desk one day, and I saw that case on her desk, and I'm thinking, oh, that's been months ago. Why is it still here? So I picked it up and opened it, and they had closed that case for under $50,000. And I went to my manager and I said, how did this happen? I was supposed to get to appeal that decision. And he basically looked at me and said, Sherry, leave it. So the people that can afford representation by CPAs and attorneys pay a lot less tax. And mom and pop, they're the backbone of the United States. And they're the ones that need to be protected. So unfortunately, that's not happening because they don't really know what they're doing a lot of times with their taxes. Sometimes they try to do them themselves. Sometimes they get someone that really doesn't care and just wants to make the money. Whatever the circumstances, they're the ones who are currently getting eaten alive by the taxes. And that's really bad.
Wow, that's very interesting, very enlightening. Um, so maybe this goes into some of the strategies that you implement now, but what are some of the ways that you see, and I assume you assist mostly mom and pop shops, businesses, local Americans who are wanting to just grow their business, family owned business. What are some of these strategies that you see work for them so that they do either have representation or they know how they're properly filing their taxes or when they're getting audited? What does that look like?
Well, first of all, I have clients that are employees. They're scared to death of the pink slip. A lot of that's happening, and they say, what can I do? I need to start a business. I'm the one that advocates the home-based business. I say home-based because you don't want another rent or another mortgage in another building. And with a home-based business, again, the tax code is written for businesses, and you can write off everything but the kitchen sink. When you have a legitimate business that you're starting, when you're an employee, you can't write off your cell phone, you can't write off your internet, you can't write off your mileage, which could be huge because for every 2 miles you drive, that's over $1 that you could deduct. So first things first, get a home-based business. Then whatever you're making on your job will be reduced if you have a loss. For example, if you make $70,000 in your first year in your business, you lost 10,000. Well, it's not the 70 that's taxable now, it's 60. So people don't understand that. And the deductions are things that you were already doing. You already have internet, you already have a cell phone. You have to buy equipment. I had to buy a new computer a couple of years ago, that kind of thing. Now, for the ones who have a business, it seems like they get stuck in that cycle where they're making money, but it's flying right out the door. Either they don't know how to manage the money correctly, or they've gotten into some bad investments, or the IRS is eating them alive. So we come up with strategies to minimize or even eliminate a lot of that tax. One of the main ones that people don't know is a mom and pop, which is a sole proprietor or a partnership that has spouses. They can hire their children to work for them. If the children are between the ages of like 8 and 18, they can work for the company. They don't have to have any taxes taken out, no federal, no state, no Medicare, or any Social Security tax taken out. So I had one guy in one of the seminars, he just jumped up and started dancing because he had 3 children between the ages of 8 and 18, and that's $15,000 that you can pay them up to 15. So that was a $45,000 deduction from whatever his business was making right off the bat. Now they do have to work. You do have to actually pay them, keep timesheets. And when my children were younger, I did this, and I literally took pictures of them doing, the trash or helping out. And one of the perks that I had for my clients when I was actually working the CPA firm was they could bring their children with them. So my children were responsible for entertaining their children. So my little children would take their little checks to the bank. This was way before the direct deposit. They would take their checks to the bank and barely reach the counter. And the tellers would be looking like, how is this kid getting, $400 every 2 weeks or whatever? And they never asked. I would have told them. That's one of the major ones. And it can work for grandchildren, but it's a little bit more difficult. You have to go through some more steps because a lot of my clients have grandchildren. So can I write off my grandchildren? Well, there are some steps that have to go. That was a major one. Another major one is probably the fact that that one was for businesses that were not incorporated. For businesses that are incorporated, whether they're a C Corp or an S Corp, your company is a separate entity from you. And there is a rule in the tax code called the Augusta Rule. The Augusta Rule says that for 14 days during the year, you can rent out your home and not have to pay any tax on it. So that came from a Masters golf tournament that's in Augusta, Georgia. There are mansions around that golf course. Golf teams come from Australia, Japan, and everywhere, and they want to rent those mansions. The whole team can stay in the mansion. The people that live around the mansions are friends with senators and congressmen. So they went and said, hey, I want this team to stay in my house during the Masters, but I don't want to pay tax on the money that they pay me. So they did that. They really did. And I looked up how much those houses are going for during the Masters. At least on average, $10,000 a day. So for 14 days, that's $140,000 that person that owns that home has tax-free. We can do that also. I actually did that during the 1996 Olympics. They were here in Atlanta, and I rented my home to a reporter from Copenhagen, Denmark, and got the money and paid for my children's private school that year.
Wow, so interesting. And I think I know the answer to this, but I'm curious if people aren't working with you or working with potentially the few other knowledgeable accountants who have this insider information, are there ways to find out about these strategies that are a bit more mainstream, or it's really just a matter of who you're working with and trusting and hoping that your accountant knows these things?
I think it's the trusting and hoping, because if you don't know what you're looking for, you're not gonna find it. If you go out there and you look up Augusta rule, you'll see it out there, but it's not explaining how you can use it. If you go out there and you can see you can hire your children, that one may be a little bit more, it may be a little easier for them to understand. I've seen articles where they even pay their infants because they have some kind of photography and they had babies, they had to use babies for it. Another sophisticated, step up from paying your children, if you're paying your children, of course, they can use that money for tuition, for private school, and, whatever they want, and that's teaching your children how to have money work for them instead of how to work for money. They can take that money and buy some equipment that your company needs and lease it back to the company and make monthly rent on whatever that is. Now, they may have to pay some kitty tax at that point, but I think a teenager would really um, learn from that. Take some of this money, buy a new computer for my mom and dad's company, and then I get monthly income from that. So that starts that whole mindset change of I got to get a job.
Yeah, I love that I love that that's something you brought up and that's something that you see as important is teaching kids how money actually works and how taxes actually work. I mean, how else? I don't know if the system's changed since I've been in school. I hope it has. I doubt it has, however. Um, and yeah, I could definitely go on a rant for the next hour about our education system and the government, but I'm curious what your thoughts are on that actually, since you're bringing up children and the mindset around money and make money work for you instead of get a job when you're 13 and hope that you make enough money to maybe one day buy a house and live a, American dream life.
Right, right. So John D. Rockefeller said something. He said, I want workers, not thinkers. So I call it the government school system. It's not public education, it's public indoctrination here in the United States. And what it is to do to our children is to make them um, the group think. They don't have any individual thinking. They don't learn critical thinking, and they learn how to be obedient employees. My children never graced the halls of a government school. As a matter of fact, my son's first government school was college. He went to Georgia State University for his master's. My daughter's first government school was Georgia State University. She went and got her bachelor's there. So I don't believe that this system is for us in the United States as far as the government schools. They're not teaching what we really know. And there are countries, even African countries, that are above us in math and science and all that, especially the Asian countries. And we've gotten soft here, and that's a detriment.
I'm curious what you see living in the US. I'm from Canada, but I haven't lived there in almost a decade, so I can't really speak to what it is like there and the groupthink there. But I'm curious, do you see this mindset shifting between kind of, I think my demographic when I was growing up in the West, it was very, you go to school and you get the good grades. Do you see this shifting with parents and their children these days to a little bit more of our mindset and what you just spoke about?
Absolutely, because the younger generation, like my children, my son's 34, my daughter's 32, they realize, number one, Social Security is not going to be there for them. It's a whole Ponzi scheme in itself, and they have to figure out a way. We have property in Costa Rica, on the Caribbean coast of Costa Rica, so we are, having a plan B, planning, and I go there at least 4 times a year so that I can make sure that the home that I purchased is okay, and sometimes it's rented out, like some people came last night, they'll be there until May 14th. But I'm building a master planned shipping container community on the east coast of Costa Rica and some land in the hills, because I don't see the United States as surviving in a way that is helpful to the people. I believe the United States is on life support. Everything's going down, and pretty soon with the BRICS and others, the dollar may not be the currency that is, I forget what, I can't think of it right now, but it's the fact that there are forces in this world, Klaus Schwab and Yuval Harari, that I believe want the United States to go down, own nothing, and you'll be happy. I see apartments coming up just like weeds around all of the metro stations, the train stations. I see these things and it's like I get these calls from hedge fund companies all the time about selling my house. And I just I don't see a good outcome. World reserve currency. So at some point in the blink of an eye, the dollar can cease being the world reserve currency and then we're toast. And I think that it's already a sinking ship. It's just taking a longer time. And some people are noticing, especially the young people. They don't want to put into this. My son is ready to move now. He works for a multinational corporation, and I'm trying to tell him, please don't move to Asia. Yeah, but yeah, I don't see, I see the younger people, I see the older people set in their ways. I see the younger people restless concerning their futures.
I love that. I love that. And I'm glad. Thank you for sharing your opinion on that. I haven't lived in a Western country in almost a decade, but I do see the same thing. And it's interesting. I think social media has a big part in that. And I also think in the last, since 2020, there's really been a shift of I mean, it started with really, you don't need to live where you were born simply because that's where you were born. You don't need to work there. You can work online. And then I think things really just opened up from there. So really good and very interesting. I mean, we help clients with this every day, but I think sometimes I'm too in it to really see how the rest of the world, if they think similar to what me and our clients and our team thinks, or if it's just because we're in this every single day. So very interesting
Yeah.
to hear your perspective. So I'm curious, going back to the topic of IRS taxation, are some of these mom and pop strategies that you previously mentioned, are these the same or similar strategies that these big corporations are using? Obviously, they're using it at a different scale, but are these strategies essentially the same strategies that these Amazons and Apples are taking advantage of?
Yes, they are the same strategy. So what I did was learn what they're doing and we can apply it. So if you do what they do, you can have what they have. If you learn how to do that. It's not like only corporations can do this. Sometimes there are rules about corporations, just like the Augusta rule um, is for corporations because your corporation is a separate entity. However, an individual can still rent out their house. And it's just as a matter of fact, the corporation, if you have a corporation, will be getting the deduction for that. It's the corporation. If I have a corporation and I rent out my home 14 times a year for board meetings, the corporation gets to deduct the rental expense and I get to pocket that money tax free. So you can use that if you're a corporation, but on the individual side, you can still rent your house out for 14 days to somebody. So these, they're interchangeable. There are very few that are only for one or the other. Like the writing off your children, that's only for the sole proprietors or for the partnerships that are spousal partnerships. But the rest of them, all these strategies that are out there, and especially as far as real estate is concerned, because there are people like Grant Cardone and Robert Kiyosaki that are using strategies with insurance that are just building wealth. And that's one of the ones that I started using in 2013 to build wealth and buy real estate. So they're out there and we the little people can still use them.
I love that. Okay, so I did have a question for you. If somebody, you mentioned the incorporated businesses, full proprietorship, if somebody's listening, they're American, they're wanting to start something out for themselves, where would you say to start? I heard you say previously to start something in your own home, don't pay rent. But along with that, what are some other tips, advices, whether it be on the taxation corporate side, on the you're starting a business from your home side? What are some tips that you can give someone?
Yes, I don't like people to go out and get a building. Oh, I'm gonna start, I had one lady that went out and she liked to cook and she found a building to rent and she started a bakery and it lasted all of 6 months and drained the 401k because that just wasn't the time for that. Starting in your home, you could start a business for under $1,000, and if it doesn't work out, you haven't sold the family cow. You can start over with another business. Find something that you're passionate about. Find something that is not going to interfere with your day job. Most of my clients have 9 to 5 jobs, but as opposed to coming home and turning on the electronic income reducer or the electronic intellect reducer, that's what I call the TV, They come home, they decompress, spend some time with their family, and then they start working on their home-based business. So doing that in the evenings and on weekends really helps to grow whatever it is. But the first thing is find something that you're passionate about doing. Find something that's going to make money. It can't be like one of my ladies said, "Oh, I love quilting. I want to make some quilts and I want to make." I said, "No, sweetheart, that can be a hobby. Keep that a hobby because Walmart and Target have quilts. We have to find something that you can offer to the marketplace that's unique. You want to stand out in the crowd and you don't want to have to compete with a $12 blanket over here from Walmart." So that's the key to it. Now, once you establish what that home-based business may be, then the first thing that you need to do is make sure that you're documenting all of your expenses. The IRS has to prove income, but you have to prove expenses. And I've seen so many people just guessing at the end of the year. Oh, I think I spent, $1,200 on this or $5,400 on it. You can't do that. You have to keep your receipts. And I know here in the United States, we have this magical fading paper where if your receipt is sitting around for a while, especially in your car in the sun, all those numbers and letters are going to be gone. A lot of people use these apps, and apps are okay. They key the information in and it may go into QuickBooks or something like that, and that's cool. I don't trust them just by themselves because if the computer goes out, the IRS still wants that information. If you drop your phone in some water, the IRS is not going to take that as an excuse. So I usually have my clients have the option of bringing that receipt into their office. They need to buy a copy machine, copy the receipt on regular paper, and staple the original and write what that was for. For example, when I go out for meals, I go out with clients. I take the receipt, staple it to the copy, and say, I went out with John Doe. We talked about his strategy for building his business, that kind of thing. So I have my receipts in paper more so than in an app because first of all, I'm not technologically savvy. But yeah, that's what they need to do. That's the number one killer when it comes down to people dealing with the IRS. The IRS will come in and say, "Give me all your documentation for these write-offs," and they don't have it. Your debit card statement and credit card statement will not suffice in an IRS audit. Because if you went to Staples to buy something, 9 times out of 10, it was an office expense, but you don't know that. They don't know that. So you have to have that receipt, not just your debit card. The debit cards and credit cards are there to help you figure out what you bought and when you bought it. But they're not going to take that, "Oh, here's my debit card and here's all I added up all the postage and I added up." They're not going to take that as your receipt. You got to have the receipts. So key them into an app or either keep them on paper in files.
Interesting. Very good to know. Very good advice. Okay. I want to ask you, there's so many directions we could take this, but you previously mentioned that you, and it sounds like it's publicized, had a large fight with the IRS. I'm curious to hear a little bit more about this and what that potentially led to.
Okay. So it was brought to my attention from a client's. Oh, I had a client that was a pastor because I specialize in audit ministers when I left the IRS because the IRS doesn't like ministers because you can't audit a church. It takes an act of Congress to audit a church, but they go in the back door and they audit the pastor. And then if they find something egregious going on, which sometimes there is some stuff going on, these people are fake pastors, whatever, then they write up the chain and they can audit the church. Well, anyway, and I came out to help the pastors. One of the pastors said one of her parishioners had some information that she kept telling her about the income tax not being something that was for people that lived and work in the States. The lady called me and really water hosed me down with a lot of information. This is after I left the IRS, mind you. And a couple of weeks later, she called and said, "Hey, all that information that I told you is in the USA Today." I got the USA Today on that Friday. It said "We the People," "Dear We the People." It was a full page color ad in the back. "Dear We the People, the income tax is a fraud." And it went on to explain all of these things about how during the war we had the tax and it was supposed to go away, but they wanted to keep it because they wanted the power and the money. And then one of the Federal Reserve chairmen said that income tax for revenue is obsolete. It's for redistribution of wealth, all of this. But in the midst of that was a $50,000 reward for anybody that could prove that we in the United States had to file an income tax return and pay an income tax. And then there was a blurb about a former IRS agent from the Criminal Investigation Division that had written a book, a report, because he started trying to go after these people that were saying that we weren't supposed to pay. And he took evenings and weekends to research, and he found out that we're not supposed to pay. So he wrote this report to his superiors at the IRS and said, hey, I'm supposed to be upholding the Constitution as an IRS agent, but it looks like these people are right. And they told him, you got 5 days to figure out whether you want to resign or you want to just, shove it, because we're not answering that. So I ordered his report. He called me because I put in there that I was a former agent, and we all got together with the people that wrote the article in the USA Today, and it was We the People Foundation for Constitutional Education. We started going around educating people about what we learned about the income tax. We didn't tell people to file or not to file. We didn't tell people to pay or not to pay. But we became such a powerful force in making people think about, they're taking my money, and is this right? That they started to prosecute us. They prosecuted Joe first because he was the darling of the tax movement. He had great lawyers and a thinking jury. He was acquitted. Vernie Kuglin was a Federal Express pilot that refused to pay. She was acquitted, although they took all her stuff later. And Tommy Cryer was a lawyer in Shreveport, Louisiana, that wrote a memorandum, a 109-page memorandum on how income is not defined in the tax code, which it isn't. Income is corporate profits. If I come to your house, Nicole, and I say, I'm going to cut your grass, and you're going to say, I'll give you $100 for that. That's an even exchange because I used my arms, my legs, and my brain to cut your grass. In exchange for my life force, you give me something that's going to feed my family. But if you switch it around to the smallest Walmart in the United States, it made $100,000 yesterday, but it has rent. It has the cost of the goods. It has salaries. It has utilities. And after all these expenses, let's say the expenses were $80,000. Their net income is $20,000. They pay tax on the $20,000, not the $100,000. So what the government is doing is saying that our life force that we'll never get back is worth nothing. You pay tax on the $100. Walmart, you got other stuff going on so you pay tax on the 20. This memorandum that he wrote, he had not filed taxes in over 10 years, and he was acquitted. I was next up. They would not let me present those court cases. The judge kept saying, I will instruct the jury on the law. And I was literally, basically, go back. Before my case, the IRS came and raided my house early one morning. I didn't even have clothes on. I had on a T-shirt. 15 to 20 agents at the door with guns on to my face. I'm a little homeschooling mother trying to keep what I earn, and they raided the house because I was out there saying, of course I wasn't filing. I was practicing what I preach. They were all around the house. They went in the backyard with a metal detector to see if I had anything buried in the backyard. They were there all day, and then they took 32 boxes, and this was in 2004. By 2007, they realized they really didn't have anything except for I stopped filing taxes, which is a misdemeanor. So they brought me up on misdemeanor charges for not filing tax return and gave me a 4-year sentence in jail. 4-year sentence in jail for not filing tax return. It wasn't about the fact that I didn't file tax return. It was about I was this voice out there. So I was considered a political prisoner. I literally spent 3 years in prison to the day. They put me in prison on Valentine's Day 2008. I got out on Valentine's Day or the day after 2011. And that was my punishment for making people think about where their resources are. We don't have another life. There's going to be Walmart forever, all over the country, all over the world. There's even one in Costa Rica. But we don't have another life. And it's a shame that the system has been manipulated to make us think that we owe a tax. Remember that saying, there's nothing sure in life but death and taxes, came from a spin doctor that the Rockefellers hired way back in the day. So that's what the fight was. And so when I came out, I wrote a book called How to Stick It to the IRS, Confessions from a Former Insider. And my mentor said, you got the balls to write a book called How to Stick It to the IRS? I said, they stuck it to me. I'm sticking it right back to them. I've written like 10 books right now. One of them is How to Escape the Rat Race. And that basically tells the person who wants to start a business how to keep, protect, and grow what they earn. So my proprietary KPG system is what I used after I got out broke, marriage broken, no money, basically hit rock bottom and started to dig. But I dug myself back out with the KPG system. I learned how to keep what I earn. I learned how to protect it with insurance and assurance. I learned how to grow it. I personally don't invest in anything that can disappear in the blink of an eye if it's controlled. IRAs, 401ks, mutual funds, stock bonds, any of that. I invest in silver, gold, and real estate. And so I look at Robert Kiyosaki, I look at Grant Cardone and others, my mentor, Myron Golden, all of these people that don't have a college degree, but are millionaires and billionaires, they're doing something, and we can do that same thing.
Wow. I did not realize that you actually went to prison, especially for 3 years. As wow, I used to having worked for the government. Wow, I didn't realize that was a part of your story.
Yep.
Okay, so KPG method. I want you to dive a little bit more into detail about what this, or maybe even what this looks like in practice for you. And I think it's interesting as well that you mention you only invest in certain hard assets. I have heard of quite a few people. I mean, I would say probably since the last election, but in the last 6 months to 12 months, pulling a lot of their, if not all of their investments out of the market because they just don't trust what that is going to look like, where that's going to go. And I'm very anti-government. It's like you are as well. I mean, I'm very happy living my life here in Paraguay right now. But I'm curious what this system looks like for you because you are actually living and practicing this, especially in the US.
Yes. So I started out with a basic person, the person that is struggling in the earn spend cycle. They get paid on Friday and they're broke by Monday, and which is typical of most Americans. You need to first of all control your expenses. We spend billions of dollars on conspicuous consumption. It's come out now about the Chinese made Birkin bags and all of that, but people are spending all that money. I know somebody with an $800 car with $4,000 worth of rims on them, that kind of thing. So keeping means decreasing your expenses. Simple things like don't go to the grocery store hungry because every time I do that, I spend 20 more dollars. Make sure I'm eating something on the way or just don't go when I'm hungry. That's simple. Making sure that you are not spending a whole bunch of money on cable TV. Obviously, I'm not a TV fan. Making sure that you don't spend a lot of money on clothes. I call Neiman Marcus needless markup. If you're broke, go to the thrift store, and even if not, I still go to the thrift store sometimes. They have nice stuff in there. They have like I bought Casper suits in there that had the tags on 'em. It's like, "Really? $120 suit, I got it for like $14." I still go to the thrift store because I'm not into fashion. I know who I am, and I don't need to show that I have this and that, and I'm wearing Nike or Versace or whatever. Those simple things, even down to the heating and gas bill. Now, in Atlanta, it does get cold, and I have a 4-story house, and I'm the only one here. I live by myself. I do have a tenant in the basement, and that's another thing. Multiple streams of income. I refinanced my house, put a full apartment down there, and she pays the whole mortgage plus some. So that's a strategy that people can use. Use what you have. If you have a basement, if you have extra rooms, but you have to take that extra money and do something with it that's going to build wealth, not going and buy a new this or that. So she pays my mortgage, and as long as somebody's here, the mortgage will eventually be paid off. Uh, you have heating bills. I take a space heater from room to room with me so that I can keep that bill low. In the summer, I created a portable air conditioner. I got a styrofoam cooler, put 18 bottles of frozen water in it from my freezer out in the garage, cut 2 holes in the top. One has a small fan that faces down in the hole, and it's making the forcing the air down on the frozen bottles of water. The other one has the little tube that comes out, like you have the dryer tube, and it's, like aluminum tube that comes out, and it blows cool air on me for 2 or 3 hours. I sit it up in a chair, and I don't do this anymore, but this was back when I was, struggling and, just getting myself back together. I put a towel in the seat, for the condensation, and I would sit there and work or lay there and do whatever I was doing. And the hardest part of that was refilling, when the bottles were no longer frozen, put them back in the refrigerator on the bottom and then pull up 18 more out. And I did that because my bills now are, gosh, they're almost $400. But I can take care of that now, especially with someone in the basement. I can't have her down there, burning up. So those are some of the things. Protect. It's not about what you earn, it's about what you keep. And people don't understand that this is the United States of America. We have 5% of the world's population here in the US. We have 70% of the world's lawsuits. There are more lawyers in Jacksonville, Florida than the whole of Japan. And what are they doing? They're suing over everything. It started with that lady that spilled hot coffee on herself in McDonald's several years ago. And now everybody uses the legal system as a lottery. So you've got to protect what you earn. And in that, you get insurance. We got car insurance. You have homeowners insurance. I, as a business owner, I have errors and omissions insurance. So just in case somebody wants to say I advised them to do something that didn't work, and that takes care of my legal fees and all that. So all these insurances. And then I call it the next one assurance. You need to save up 6 months of expenses in cash or not in a CD or anything like that, in something liquid. So if your monthly expenses are $5,000, you need $30,000 sitting somewhere liquid, because honestly, Nicole, when the excrement hits the portable cooling device in the United States, which it will, then at least somebody has 6 months to figure it out while they're still paying their bills. So that's the protect. And then of course the grow. The grow starts out with investing first of all in yourself and starting that business, that home-based business, getting to the point where the money's coming in and you're investing it back into the business. I say 50% back into the business and 50% into something that's going to grow a legacy for you. So I started out buying gold and silver in, oh my goodness, ages ago. Gold was $313 an ounce when I started buying gold. Silver was $6.16 an ounce, and now you see where they are. Then you get to the point where you learn other strategies. I think it came from Grant Cardone. I may be wrong, but it's the buy, borrow, die, where you borrow from your Section 7702 insurance policy. I've got 3 of those going on 4, where I can borrow the money from the policy, use that to get more real estate, and when I'm doing that, it's not taxable because it's a loan. And when I'm paying it back, I'm paying back a loan. And these things just aren't out there for people to see. You gotta know these things. And when people are paying attention to the football game and all of that on Saturdays, until Tom Brady starts stroking me a check, my team is the Jackson team. So I'm gonna be doing the research, and if you're caught up in whatever's on, I don't even know what's on television. Whatever comes on television Monday through Friday, if you're caught up in that, then you're making somebody else rich, as opposed to you coming through and building a legacy. Because my granddaughter, which I've taken to Costa Rica twice, and the 24th of this month we're going back, she's 10 years old. She knows she has property somewhere else. It changes the mindset of a child. She knows, her family has property and she has another home in another country. First of all, traveling changed their minds. My children traveled with us when they were homeschooled. They would do their homework while we were away. But even when I was younger, we traveled. I'm originally from Detroit, and we were in Canada all the time. Crossing over the Ambassador Bridge, or we were in Ohio somewhere. And travel is so important. So again, that part of the growth system includes your family, and it includes building a legacy. The Rockefellers, they have foundations, the Ford Foundation, Carnegie Foundation. All these people, they have these Hyannisport and Kennebunkport, they have these compounds. We can do these things if we just concentrate on building for ourselves and our family. We want to, I have some acreage in Costa Rica. We're building a compound. I'm building that community, not just for my family, but for people who say, you know what, the United States is not the end all and be all. There are other places that are you won't freeze to death in Costa Rica. You won't starve to death. There's something growing off of at least 60% of the trees, and within a few miles, you got fish to eat. And people grow chickens in the backyard as opposed to all the hormone shot in there. You just cut the head off and have the chickens are good. The food is nutrient dense. So these are the things that I know that you have going on in Paraguay also. But when people start getting their focus off the wrong things, which is too much social media in the wrong way and the television, and start figuring out, you know what? I need to start preparing my family for whatever there is to come. Because Oprah has her island. What's his name? Bronson has Necker Island. Ted Turner has over 1,000 acres up in Montana, which I passed by when I was up there. Do what they do, and you can have what they have.
So much good information there. So much good. Thank you for sharing everything you shared. It's really interesting you mentioned you're playing for the Jackson team, which is your last name, to clarify. We're not talking about like Jackson, Florida or something like that. Um, eh, it's so interesting because it makes me think of something my partner told me. He's originally from Latin America, from Mexico. And that's where we're living now. But he mentioned to me that during a lot of the bigger football games, because, for football as in soccer here, football as in football in the US, and I feel like some sort of brainwashing, if you want to call it that. A lot of the governments, when there's larger games on, they'll be passing laws and doing things because they know the citizens are preoccupied. They don't care. They're worried about who's winning the soccer game or the football game, which you as a person have no individual stake in at all. It's not bringing you any more knowledge, any more wealth. It's just really a poor mindset, but governments around the world, not just in the US, want you to be in this poor mindset. And so I
Right.
think that really having the knowledge and the power and then also taking the action is important, as you have, as I have, to have options for yourself and get out of the system or stay in the system, but get into other systems as well.
Exactly, exactly. Bread and circles is what I call it. They do want that. Back when the Bill Clinton, Monica Lewinsky's, the focus was on that whole thing, they were giving China most favored nation status, and they're supposed to be paying the tariffs in the first place. With all of the things that are going on right now, and even back then in the day when they passed the income tax and the Federal Reserve, it was Christmas. Everybody had gone home for Christmas and they passed it. So they are intentionally doing these things to to pillage the people, and we're done with that. We're done. Those of us who want to take action, we're done, and we're. I'm one that's out there telling other people, hey, there's a better way.
Yeah, as am I. And I love everything you shared today. So you spoke about some of your books. Please share where people can find you, where they can find the books, and find you anywhere online.
Online, I have a website, sherrypeeljackson.com, and my consulting services and books are up there. I have a YouTube channel, Dr. Sherry Peel Jackson, or Thrive with Sherry, I think is the thing. But if you look up Sherry Peel Jackson, you'll see the YouTube. I'm not really savvy with technology, so I am on Instagram, but I don't know how to put stuff up by myself. So I don't have much up there. But basically, my YouTube is where I am. I have been very, very busy this year getting things together in Costa Rica. I haven't posted much, but there are videos up there. And when I go at the end of this month, I'll probably be posting more.
Amazing. Enjoy your, not your first, not your last time. Enjoy all your times in Costa Rica. Beautiful country. And thank you for being here, Sherry.
Thank you, Nicole, for having me on.